A very warm welcome to our TechCentral TCS Plus podcast. My name is Jaydev Chiba. Today we have in the studio with us Kiv Moodley and Jannie Malan. Kiv is the country manager for Workday and Jannie is the manager solutions consulting. Gentlemen, welcome to the studio. Good to have you here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be covering a very interesting topic today. And I've had to read this a few times just to make sure I get it right. It's human by design, real world AI, real human impact. So it's a topic that conjures up many thoughts of the kinds of discussions we're going to have today. I think to start the conversation, it is important for us to set the scene. Since you are both from Workday, perhaps let's use that as the backdrop for our discussion. It would be good if you could take us through your roles at Workday. And what do you do?
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Jaydev. So, as you mentioned, I'm the country managing director for Workday. I've been with Workday for 7 years next month. Jannie and I actually started on the same day in 2018 when we opened up the Workday office. My role is to serve the Workday community, our customers, our partners, our team, being our workmates, and also our prospective customers. So part of my role is to get insights from the market, understand different trends, and at the same time, what I'm most passionate about is our people. So I spend a lot of time mentoring and coaching our team and amplifying their potential.
Okay, Jannie?
Thank you, Jaydev. Yes, so as Kiv said, almost 7 years ago now, I joined. We met each other in the UK. And I started as a solution consultant. Back in the day, I now look after a solution consulting team that comprises solution consultants, functional solution consultants, and then also enterprise architects. And in essence, what we look after is to engage with prospects and also clients, understand where their challenges are, where they ideally want to move to, and how we can potentially enable them through technology. And then by way of demos and other test drives and other engagements, we help them get a vision of where they can potentially take their business through Workday.
So essentially start looking at what the business problems are before you even start offering a solution.
We have to
them.
Understand it as is, yeah.
So let's turn to the topic of AI. What are your thoughts around AI? There's always two schools of thought. Is it hype or are we unleashing human potential? Your thoughts?
Look, I think we're living in a seriously interesting era. As you mentioned, typically with groundbreaking technology or ideas, you have Gartner used to refer to it as the hype curve. So you have the hype, and then you have this trough of disillusionment. I feel AI is here to stay long term. I think what we're seeing is some really good use cases in terms of how it's positively affecting the workforce. How businesses are possibly growing, allowing them to be more competitive at the same time. So I do feel that we're now getting to a point where AI is becoming a lot more meaningful. I think organizations are taking a step back to think what is the impact to their organizations. And I think long term, there's going to be elements of AI that probably will exist. A few years ago, there used to be this concept of this nexus of forces, and we spoke about mobility and big data and cloud computing. And that's all embedded today. So it's embedded in everything that we do. And I feel that that's probably where AI is going to move into the future.
So we're going through that classic adoption curve
yes, yeah.
that you've just described in terms of Gartner.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely concur with Kiv in terms of the hype cycle. And AI is no different from any other technology in following that curve. And perhaps Amara's law explains it quite well in conjunction with the hype cycle, that AI is probably overestimated in the short term, but underestimated in the long term. And I think we're going to see some really interesting things just because of the nature of AI. When we talk about the almost a demonization of AI or being a savior, there's definitely two distinct schools of thought around there. And I think a lot of the initial apprehension came about through not knowing what AI was. I certainly found that to be the truth until I was fortunate enough. Workday actually invested and me completing a diploma through Oxford around AI specifically. And once you understand what it's all about, I think you start seeing how potentially it can enable humans to be more productive, more efficient, and ideally move on to maybe do some things that are more fulfilling from a human perspective.
Yeah, I guess it's like all things, you think it's going to be the silver bullet. It potentially could be the silver bullet, but we've seen over history, technology has never been the only silver bullet. It's always needing to be embedded, understood, utilized effectively in your environment, and then you get the value coming out of it. And I think we're going through that journey as well.
Absolutely.
So how are you using AI in your daily lives?
Yeah, I think I've embraced it, and I think I would encourage everyone to use AI in your personal lives and look at the different technologies. So between Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini and Perplexity AI, I try and use the different engines, asking different questions. At work, we are really productive using Google Gemini, and I think there's a recent study in South Africa saying that there was, I think, about 70 billion rand savings on productivity using it. The other use case for me, which there's two use cases personally. So the one is Deepak Chopra's launched Digital Deepak. So he's taking 95 of his books. He's digitized all his interviews. Instead of large language models, it's a small language model because he's taken up the concept of him.
Yeah.
And I've been interacting with that. And it's been amazing to ask questions about life. And I meditate a lot, so meditation, breathing techniques, and that's amazing. The one that's probably shocked me the most is I've got a 10-year-old son, and he's got a puppy that he recently has that his mom got for him. And between the both of them, they've programmed a command on Alexa. So every time when little Fudge needs to have his meal, Alexa says, "Fudge, this is your meal time," and for what meal it is. And he goes and he runs towards the kitchen to where his food is. So the fact that a dog is now embracing AI, for me, it's the last 2 weeks I've observed it. It's completely changed my perspective on the power and the potential. So
Yeah.
And I guess it's really just about figuring out the use case.
yes, yeah.
And every time you think about it, there could be another and another and
Yeah.
another use case. So the value is almost embedded horizontally across everything we do.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's not a vertical technology as such.
It's not, and that's why, coming back to your opening question, I feel it's going to be embedded in our day-to-day lives. It already is today with how we use our GPSs, how we interact with search, how recommendations are made by Netflix and different technologies. It might not say powered by AI, but it's already embedded today in terms of our daily lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So both Kiv and his dog being early adopters. That's excellent. Similarly, my passion sits slightly more towards the visual side of things. I'm quite keen on design and these kind of things. And so, for example, I'm working on some training I need to do internally in Workday for fundamentals around design for some of our team. And I've used, amongst others, ChatGPT and Midjourney to help me create the curriculum for that. And then subsequently to create the visuals for those as well. So I absolutely agree with Kiv. It's a bit of a rabbit hole because it's just going to exponentially expand in terms of those use cases and where people see the need and kind of ask the question, well, is this something that AI could potentially do or help me with or perhaps do quicker and better?
Yeah. So what are the most impactful way businesses are currently leveraging AI in the workplace? What are the trends you're seeing? And, are there areas and myths that you need to demystify about AI?
Look, I think it's a really, really good question. I think there's a lot of use cases in terms of how to improve employee productivity, especially when it comes to repetitive and mundane tasks. So I think there's a trend in terms of looking at that. And those tasks could differ based on workflows and could possibly differ based on your role in the organization. But the minute you start focusing on that and delivering solutions that are tangible and provide business value, all of a sudden an employee spends less time on the mundane tasks. And between Gartner and Forrester and all the different analysts out there, for many years they spoke about the fact that a lot of employees are bogged down in terms of being less strategic and the day-to-day activities kind of taking more control. And I think this is the power where AI is going to create that shift, where depending on your role in the organization, you can have a lot more time to be more strategic, to think about where the business is going. How can a company grow? How can a company be more competitive? How do you unlock the talent of a team? How do you possibly increase margins as well? So I feel that productivity gain for me is one of the areas that I see that AI definitely is going to create a trend for.
Yeah, big one. Jannie, you also?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I see different forms of adoption. I see a lot of people are starting to play with it in organizations, trying to get a sense of what is it all about and where can we start, applying it within the organization. And then I see, organizations or industries that are very much focused on leveraging the benefit that it can potentially bring. Now, I think we're going to probably see the adoption very different in different verticals and different industries. Point in case, just last week I was spending time with a very, very big global logistics company. And they are already so far advanced in terms of what they're doing to keep their people safe in their warehouses by having those fully AI automated and just having human oversight. So that's really impressive. And some people are far along that route. Then on the other side, I think we're seeing a lot of benefits in healthcare. It can expedite processes, diagnosis, for example, the development of new treatments. We're seeing a lot of online doctors come into play as well. These bots that also reach out to us and try and sell us things. We're seeing a lot in the insurance, and I think in the same article that you mentioned, it was encouraging to see how far ahead the South African insurance industry is in terms of using AI for fraud detection, to get indications of whether someone might default on their payments, all of these kind of things as well, and also to profile potential clients for their products and their product fit. And we're going to see this in marketing. We're seeing it in the legal industry as well. Casework. Why can't that be picked up and that research be done by AIs? There's so much potential.
I think we've come over the last few years where people were experimenting. Now we're starting to see the value starting to emerge. And I think, to your point, looking at individual industries, I think those industries have figured out where the maximum value can be gained, and tying that to good business results and benefits at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. So let's turn to kind of the issue of business and HR or human capital. How can businesses ensure the ethical and responsible use of AI in the workplace? I think that's always a big question, particularly if you look at things like data privacy, data hygiene, bias in these language models and transparency. I think there's a requirement on an obligation on organizations to do things in an ethical manner. What do you think about this?
Look, I think it's a very interesting time because many organizations today have to make decisions that they weren't thinking about 2 years ago. So especially when you look at the role that AI plays in the impact and the fact that a lot of organizations are benchmarking themselves versus other companies. So a few weeks ago, I met with one of our advisory firms that we work with, and they told me that one of the big retailers in South Africa, their exco has basically said if their top 10 or top 5 projects do not have anything AI related to it, it won't get approved. And that shows you that there's a perception out there in terms of companies wanting to AI the business, but then there's a reality in terms of how do you make that real. So my view would be that every organization needs to really think about what AI means to them, maybe create some type of think tank looking at the business cases. But probably what will be the foundation layer for that is some type of AI governance. So there'll be an emergence of an AI governance officer or somebody in the organization taking a role. You probably need an executive sponsor. So if we think about how most good projects are managed, you have an executive sponsor, you've got a governance committee, you've got project management teams, and then you make sure that you manage change as well. I think those elements need to come in to lead to where AI comes in. I think the other element, another variable to consider is probably a risk matrix. So coming back to your point on data, making sure that if any application needs to be used or use case, what is the element of data, the complexity, and what impact does it have on possible bias? So I feel that many organizations will build teams, focus teams on AI governance to come, looking at some of those different variables.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Governance is going to be key around that. But also, I think the important thing is that it needs to be understood that AI is not going to be standalone within a larger technology framework. So it's going to be important to understand how AI functions within that larger framework. And I think it's probably going to have organizations ask a lot of questions around their data, how that's being managed, how clean it is, where it is, how secure it is, and how accessible it is for those AI models. But really, they're going to have to put those things in place, and those are things that we've done in Workday as well. As what is our framework around that? And it includes things, for example, like explainability. Explainability. Can you explain what the model looks like? Can you defend the data points that it's accessing? To what extent are they secured? Where are you touching personal data? And then also, are you keeping the human in the loop? That is critical for us, that you can use AI to enable and to surface those insights. But at the end of the day, there still needs to be human oversight, and there needs to be a human that makes a specific decision based on that data. So there's going to have to be quite a bit of work being done, and I think this is being done globally. We see these AI governance organizations start popping up, but every organization is likely going to have something similar inside.
I just want to touch back on the point you made about the 5 top projects in companies need to have AI embedded in it. And it speaks to the point you made about understanding what AI is and what it really means. I guess it may be a naive approach to say we have to have AI because everybody has AI.
Yeah.
And that needs to be overcome. So isn't there a level of educating that needs to be done, understanding that needs to be done?
Look, I completely agree. I think if you're a listed organization, you have pressures from board members, stakeholders, shareholders, and then your exco in terms of which way do you move and how do you pivot. And then your competitor has possibly the first mover advantage in terms of launching something, an initiative, and it goes out to the media. So there's that pressure that organizations are going through. For the smaller businesses or the ones that are possibly not listed, the risk is probably even greater because there's a lot of unknown factors in terms of how nimble are your competitors, how fast are they growing. So I definitely think that element does exist. There's some research data that has recently come out that says that the next organizations that become $1 million organizations will be run by fewer people than ever before, purely based on AI. So you possibly will have a startup that does $1 million in turnover with only 3 people.
Yes.
And that fundamentally changes how things evolve. I do go back to the fact that, and this is from a Workday perspective as well, we lead by purpose in what we do and integrity. So with the companies that we advise, and Jannie, I'm probably stealing his thunder slightly, will be launching a masterclass in AI in South Africa very soon, where we want to sit with South African organizations and understand their business, understand their pain points, look at their challenges, think about the vision, the culture of the company, where do they want to go, how do they want to grow, and at the same time, then we think about how can AI help amplify that. That's the approach we take because it's a bit more qualitative and then quantitative at the same time. It's a lot more measurable rather than just having this AI ban and thinking about how do we just AI a business.
Yeah. And to touch on that as well, I think there's a problem in just banning around the term AI itself, because that in itself is almost become a bit of a collective noun for underlying technologies, because it could be machine learning, it could be agents, it could be large language models. So, which of those technologies, and I think we're probably going to be looking at, as generative AI grows as well, we're going to be looking at more solutions that comprise what we understand AI to be. So it's going to be important for organizations to understand AI to some level of granularity.
Yeah, I want to go back to the point you made about data and data hygiene. In the old days, data was important, but not that important. As long as reports got generated, it was fine. Then we moved into the era of warehousing and big data and now machine learning, etc. And data quality has just become more and more important, again, as a capability in the organization. And I don't know if companies always realize the importance of data and data quality. As much as we say data is the new oil, there's a lot of building blocks behind that needs to be catered for.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because if you want to enable all of these beautiful AI technologies, the one thing that is imperative is large amounts of data, but also clean data. Because in many cases, your output is going to be directly proportional to the input of that data. And this is, I think, where one of the boons of Workday is for us, is the ability to go to an organization and say, well, you know what, we can give you a great head start because we're already giving you one of the largest and cleanest sets of people data that's out there, which immediately expedites your ability to use AI on top of that data set. But you're absolutely right.
I think Jannie and I, we use different analogies when we speak to our prospective clients and our customers as well. So data is definitely the new oil, the new currency, which we had many years ago. At the same time, is a foundation layer for what we do. I think the risk we see with some organizations is they've got data in pockets and they've got the same variables of the data.
Yes.
So which version is the element that's the truth? The analogy that I use is that if you take 6 Lego blocks, so a 2x4 Lego block, and I normally ask the companies we consult with in terms of how many permutations do you think you have? So just 6 different Lego blocks. And then I'll get an answer like 20, 30, 40. I think the answer is like 156 million. Now, on 6 Lego blocks, if there's 150 plus million permutations of different shapes and different forms, when you sit in your organization and you've got data sitting in different places, with different variables, how do you make decisions in real time? This is before AI on growth of the company. Do we have the right teams? Are we performing at the right level of productivity? Are we aiming for operational excellence? So to your point, data is probably one of the most foundational pillars.
So in those disparate data marts, call them whatever you want to, there's that need for harmonizing that data.
Yes,
because you typically find that there's duplicated data, and they don't necessarily tie up with each other, and they don't even talk to each other. So that, I think, is a fundamental challenge that companies need to solve, not just for AI, I think, in general.
Agree. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the question to some extent is how can I potentially use AI to clear up a lot of that data as well, because there's an opportunity there.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's this old school of thought that many organizations, if you think about a hierarchy of how a company is built, you have subject matter excellence, you've got people in different roles. They typically go up the old career ladder, which doesn't exist anymore, which is quite vertical. And then with the stovepipe mentalities, you have somebody in finance, somebody in HR, somebody in ops. And in those teams, you've got discrete teams. So the accounts receivable team might not speak to the accounts payable team. Correct. Or the talent team does not speak to the recruiting team or learning team. There's where the pockets of data exist. So it's those stovepipe mentality in terms of everyone building the elements of data. And I think that's where, with AI, and this going back to foundational principles, that's where a lot's possibly going to change.
And it's a big opportunity, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think we've touched on a lot of these issues. So implementing AI successfully can present practical challenges for organizations, So what are some of the common hurdles? I think we spoke about one or two of them, and considerations that business face when integrating AI solutions, particularly within the HR and finance, which is the area of your expertise. What are some of the best practices you would suggest and that Workday typically puts forward to their clients? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think it really starts by understanding the why. So before we look at the hype curve or thinking about how to AI a possible business, is start with the why. So we spend a lot of time with the companies that we work with to really understand their requirements, getting to a point where we can be that grounded to what Jannie mentioned on getting to a business case, and then looking at specific scenarios in terms of if we had to look at this workflow, what would the impact be to the business? Now, it doesn't stop there. Our approach is to measure it. So we want to get to rands and cents in terms of really understanding what is the measurable business impact of leveraging AI.
Absolutely, but I'll add to that, there's typically 4 areas where I usually see a challenge for organizations that are looking to adopt AI and start leveraging it. First of all is measurable value. Because a lot of organizations are getting incremental value. Say, now I've got all of my project managers or my employees using ChatGPT or whatever the case might be. We're expediting meeting notes, those kind of things. But that's incremental value. So how do we develop that measurable value across the larger organization? So I think our advice around that specifically is find those value-centric use cases and get the parameters for what is going to constitute value so that you can measure in an ongoing way and discard if something is not giving you that value from an AI perspective. The second one is often user experience, because it can be quite disruptive if you now say, well, you need to use these AI tools. And across the organization, not everyone might be able to adopt it as quickly. So what we certainly suggest in that regard is to look at things like conversational AI, to look at contextual AI, and to also look at where you're automating, looking at AI within the flow of work. So it doesn't become a disjointed. Someone who is used to following a process, it's easier for them to now find a logical point within the process where AI enables them, rather than having to go to a separate system or consult a separate AI app, those kind of things. Then also pace of innovation. And this is just going to expedite. So it's often very difficult. There's so many new things coming about. So in that regard, we're fortunate, and we certainly suggest things like pre-built APIs or connectors into AI to manage that. And then also strategic AI partnerships. Create those partnerships with people who have done it before, who've created the success, or AI organizations that can help you and guide you on that journey. And then finally, trust, or lack of trust rather, because again, and I still find myself, I think general common sense needs to be one of those critical skills in the future, because you know there's a lot of things that AI can do that's questionable as well. So to your point around the governance we spoke about earlier, how do we ensure that people trust the AI tools that we're putting in there and trusting the results that they're deriving for them?
And I think that these are great elements to build into that governance model.
Absolutely.
In terms of the decision criteria. So the one thing that, and Jannie mentioned it before, the one thing that Workday does fundamentally differently is with the agentic AI agents that we have, we do provide a fact sheet. Sometimes the industry could call it a model card, which gives our prospective customers and customers a view in terms of how do we build this solution? What data do we leverage? How are we mitigating things like bias? So the reason why that's important is as companies today look at embarking on leveraging AI partners, you've got to build that into your decision tree matrix in terms of, okay, if this is the partner technology I'm going to be using, let's have a look underneath the hood in terms of what are they doing when it comes to ethics and ethical AI and removing things like bias. How are they working with the right data and coming back to integrity as well?
I'd actually go one further and say if you're approaching a AI provider that's unable or perhaps unwilling to give you that explainability or transparency, you should probably be running a mile.
So how does Workday, I mean, we've spoken a lot about what you do for clients and how you advise clients. So what are you doing internally in terms of leveraging AI? I suppose particularly for HR and finance, but even in the broader organization.
Look, I think I am, and Jannie mentioned something which is just awesome, which I completely forgot about. The fact that he went on that certification recently with Oxford. Workday has completely embraced AI in everything that we do when it comes to our product, our solution, and our employees as well. So if we take a snapshot of where Workday is today, we're a 20-year-old organization. We in South Africa for 7 years. We now run just over 1 trillion transactions on our platform. We have 70 million users under contract. We have just over 11,000 customers globally. And I think the most important thing is that all of that sits in the biggest and cleanest data set in the world when it comes to HR and finance. So within the Workday platform, our data is never replicated. So it's always a single source of the truth. Something we remember from back in the day, we used to talk about business intelligence. How do we get to the single source of the truth? When the Workday was founded in 2005, those are the principles that we had. So we've actually been leveraging AI and machine learning for just over a decade, if I'm not mistaken. Last year, as an example, 95% of our customers went live on their projects on time, on budget, globally. And that's a huge stat when you look at time to value and how companies invest in technology and then achieve value from it. So we've taken the approach that we embracing AI, we want to amplify human potential. So it's not really about replacing humans in any way. It's about augmenting AI in terms of the use cases we have. Jannie will talk about a few of them. We have 85 plus different AI use cases in our technology. We have probably about plus minus 12 or so agentic AI agents. We just had a press release yesterday. And that's on the product side. On the employee side, we've all been certified on understanding the impact and the role of AI. We've all clearly understood AI governance models that exist. So every employee's been on training to understand that. We do use different AI technologies on a day-to-day basis. So I'm a big fan of Google Gemini. I use it every day in terms of taking data into Gemini, creating analysis, and allowing me to make decisions faster in terms of how we leverage it. And so too does our team. So I think the nice thing is we've got an amazing platform being Workday that we use internally. Jannie will talk about some of those use cases and externally. But internally, we have a culture that is very pro-AI to understand the use cases. I think the key thing that our management team talks about is how do we amplify human potential. So,
No, I think you summed it up beautifully. I think we're fortunate in that we can drink our own Kool-Aid, so to speak, and that we obviously use the Workday system ourselves with the AI that's already there, whether it's expense report, anomaly detection, these kind of things, but also the more people side of things to aid how we hire for skills and all of those kind of things. But then internally as teams as well, I've got a dedicated community of practice where we share AI that we found to help us during the course of a week or whatever. We socialize that, look and see if that's something that everybody can leverage off. And then also our development teams use significant AI as well in various forms to actually build the product itself. So absolutely, we're really
so
embedded.
it's clearly well embedded in your organization's ethos in the way you operate.
I think we're very fortunate based on our industry and level of maturity that it's been well adopted. So yes.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we're very fortunate about is the foresight of our founding members to at that point in time, was it now 20 years ago, to make the decision, which was unpopular at the time, to go exclusively cloud. Fortunately, that forced them to set up architecture, which has now been really beneficial in enabling AI, just because it makes it that much easier and that much quicker to produce, results, reports, those kind of things. All those things that drive AI as well.
I want to stay on the theme of human potential and the use of AI. So, how is AI specifically impacting the skills needed for roles in HR? Because clearly they need to reskill themselves and in finance. And what skills are becoming crucial and critical? And how can organizations and individuals prepare for this changing landscape that's evolving at the moment?
Look, I think we're in such an interesting time. So I spoke. So my son is 10 years old. He's in grade 4, and he has a view in terms of possibly what he wants to study at the moment, and what job he wants to get. And I shocked him the other day to say that the job you're probably going to do, and the education you're probably going to study does not exist today. And then I had to explain to him why. And I feel there's an element of that we still don't know, but there's a lot that we do know. So we do know that anyone involved with data scientists, social scientists, data migration, data cleansing, a lot of those data roles obviously do exist today and will continue to grow. I think we'll see the emergence of a chief AI officer as well, and AI like Scrum teams coming on board to look at different roles. And then, and Jannie will add some color to this as well. I think when we look at different domains like HR and finance, the question then becomes, if you're a recruiting agent today, you still might be one tomorrow, but the definition of your role will possibly change because AI will automate those mundane tasks and allows you to be more strategic. So I think there's lots of different elements that will change in terms of the future roles we don't know that exist today. And there's lots of roles that we are aware of today that companies need to be thinking about. So I think when an organization builds this AI governance framework, then they need to do a bit of an analysis in terms of their skills and understanding that. So probably going to tee you up for some of those elements and skills as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to come back to you, and I totally agree with all of those. I've abstracted it slightly, looking at the analysts as well and their predictions around that. And I think it really resonates. Things like critical thinking, it's going to be imperative. Problem solving, active learning. I think we adaptability, resilience. I think those are skills or meta skills that are going to be critically important to any role, regardless, to take you into that future and to be able to adapt, because I think things are going to just exponentially change, especially with the advent of AI. So,
I was thinking about the other day. So I started programming when I was quite young. And the only reason was that my dad was not computer literate. And the company that he worked for at the time didn't give him the ability to educate him. And it was during apartheid and all the other things. So he did something smart. And I was about 9 or 10 years old. He brought the books home from work. So I learned to understand how to operate on DOS and 3.1 and 6.2. And I literally trained him on how to do so. But when I started programming back then, I used things like BASIC and Pascal and stuff. I still remember like the most beautiful command for me was if then else. And then I think about AI. AI covers the maybe, right? And that's fundamentally changed how, coming back to critical thinking, how we think and how we challenge ourselves moving forward as well. So I completely agree with you. I think those skills, even though it's not seen in the banner of AI, those soft skills are probably more required right now as we look at this concept of amplifying human potential than ever before.
The challenge we've got, though, is that our education system is not necessarily fulfilling those needs for the next generations that are coming down. Some of them may be, but not all of them. I don't think we have time to delve too deeply into.
Agree.
Into
I think we both agree on that.
One of my last questions to you, I guess, rolling out AI, companies are always going to say, what's the return on investment? What's the business value? And how do I make an impact?
Sure.
What are the metrics and what are the indicators that you would be helping your customers with and advising on how companies should assess and review or decide on AI projects?
Yeah.
Oh, happy to touch on this as well. So, there's a number of things. One of the first ones that we see is looking at tasks and faster completion. Can you quantify that? And what does that mean for the organization? Then, of course, also the expediting of processes. So the time spent on processes, like the hiring process, for example, and we typically see a 38% reduction in that hiring process if we start augmenting with AI. AI that can passively look for candidates, that can help you create the job requisitions, that can actually help you with the stack ranking of those candidates, and then at the same time link them to critical skills that you might not even be aware of that you have in the organization to really expedite those processes, and that becomes a significant amount of money that's typically saved. And then there's softer things like increases in improved internal mobility for employees, for example. So having AI be able to understand where people are in the organization, where the needs are, where they ideally would like to go within the organization, and then to start matching those so that you've got ready candidates that you can move into those critical positions as well. Those are some of the ones at top of mind.
Yeah, I think the benefit we have is that we're very purpose-led again when it comes to AI. We look at, we're not planning to roll out hundreds and hundreds of agentic AI agents. It's more based on quality versus quantity. So we spend a lot of time within our ecosystem, hearing from our customers, partners as well, in terms of where do we think the critical problems are and what's affecting companies to grow. Some of the other aspects is things like, and it might seem trivial, but today we still have a lot of South African companies that manage expenses where you have a meeting and there's a receipt and it's still manual, and sometimes that paper gets lost. And a lot of that has been automated, but what we're doing with our AI engine on expenses is that we're able to detect anomalies in real time. And typically there's about, I think, $500,000 a year that's wasted in terms of a finance team spending time trying to remediate and fix those elements. Also when it comes to things like journal detection, making sure that companies pay faster, policy management, and looking at business process improvement. So Workday is spending a lot of our time in terms of focusing on those use cases that we believe will be specific. What Jannie's team and my team does is when we meet with an organization is we understand where they are, their journey, again, their industry, and we look at the use cases, think what could be the most applicable to them.
So before we close, I just want to hear if you have any final messages that you'd like to leave the audience with.
Yeah.
Embrace AI. It's here to stay. Find where it benefits your life. Play around with it. But again, be critical. Be critical in terms of the results. Question the results and find out what works for you, and have a bit of fun.
Yeah, I think your last point, so coming back to fun, I think every individual should really think about how do they leverage AI in their day-to-day lives. And the more you can be familiar with it, it's a hidden skill that probably might help you in the future. I think we had an interview a couple months ago with one of our key customers, executive at a leading JSE listed company, and she spoke about the fact that this concept we've got to run with the machines. So I think we've got to augment AI in terms of what we do to amplify human potential. Then by doing so and understanding the right use cases, we can take insight and be able to create impact. We're able to improve the employee satisfaction, employee well-being. We're able to make decisions that's quite ethical based on the data that we have, and at the same time leading to an experience that allows a company to grow. So I'm quite passionate about potential of people and unlocking that. And I do feel that AI has a role to play in terms of unlocking human potential as well.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. I think it's been a fascinating conversation, and thank you for helping me unlock and unpack quite a lot of the issues around AI. And I think at a very practical level, you have made it clear that, there's a lot of value to be had. And I think it's more about companies and organizations embracing AI and going on the journey as it unfolds. So thank you.